Hello, I'm Enzo, and over a few months I've been streaming Borderlands. Yes, the original Borderlands 1. Out of all of the games in the series, I have the least playtime in 1, but I love it just as much as 2 and TPS. For this run, I decided to play Mordecai. It was either him or Lilith because I was planning for the endgame, and I think Mordecai is so much more fun to play, especially thanks to his insane skill trees. Since there's no restrictions, most of this run is going to be pretty normal. My main goal with this run is to reach the true endgame, which is reaching max level and beating the final boss, which in this case I consider Cromrax to be the final boss because he is a raid boss, and by miles the most difficult enemy in the game. Starting out, it always takes a little bit to get used to Borderlands' aiming system because it always feels a bit off, but once you get used to it, it's actually not too bad. In a unique first, I decided to use my golden keys and open a few golden chests to get some really good starting loot. I did use these a bit later on because this gear can easily carry me for a few levels, which is going to be awesome. But again, this is literally the first time I've ever touched the golden chest, which I find pretty funny. It's always because I've been doing challenge runs for this game, and I guess all the other times I just forgot about it. I'm gonna be skipping over a good portion of the game because, especially the early game, isn't super interesting. One main thing to note is that I always like to do most of the side quests in the early game so that I can get a ton of XP to be pretty much on level most of the time. I've always felt that Borderlands 1 is the most difficult out of all of the Borderlands games, mostly just for the early game. Obviously, Borderlands 2 and 3 have ridiculous endgame scaling, but that's a completely different thing. I'm talking about like base difficulty. Borderlands 1 is the hardest. That also brings me back to my character choice. Why did I pick Mordecai over Lilith? Mostly because I felt like it. The main reason I was considering playing Lilith instead is because she makes the Cromrax fight way easier. Her phase walk is also great for movement and survivability, but I much prefer Mordecai's pistol and sniper skills. The only real disadvantage to playing Mordecai is how squishy he is. Well, that and Bloodwing's code being complete garbage. I'm probably going to mention it again later on, but during this run I actually figured out kind of how Bloodwing works, and she's not actually that bad. See, you can't just throw Bloodwing out and hope for the best. Her code seems to work more like a laser-guided missile, at least for the first target. You have to look at the target you want her to hit for a little bit and she homes in way better. Once you get the skill at the bottom of Mordecai's middle skill tree, Bloodwing can actually hop to multiple targets, and she seems to path way better to different targets instead of just a single one. But with the build I'm going, I won't actually be getting that tree until the very end. And that's a perfect transition into my skill tree loadout. Mordecai has a ton of very powerful skills, but the main tree I'm going to be focusing first is snipers. Mordecai's sniper tree has the most overpowered skill in the game. That is, of course, Trespass, which lets you shoot through enemies' shields, or completely ignore them, which is pretty awesome. This is great for pretty much all enemies, but best of all, Guardians. You can easily one-shot Guardians with this build, because most of Guardians' health is actually in their shield, not their red HP bar. And this tree has two other amazing skills. The second most important skill in the sniper tree is called Smirk. This lets you get more XP from critical kills, which again, more XP means I can level up faster, which is always good. The last skill that I like in here is of course Deadly, which gives me extra damage and reload speed after a kill. All in all, this tree is awesome. Naturally, once I'm done with the left tree, I'm going to the right tree for a bunch of pistol skills. And I'll finish it up with some Bloodwing skills in the middle tree. One of my favorite strategies in this game to get overleveled relatively easy is actually go to the Shock Crystal Cave early on. Is this a good idea? Absolutely not. The enemies here are way higher level than you, and you just get shredded to pieces if they hit you. However, the crab worms at the beginning have an easy to hit critical spot. Combine that with Mordecai, and I can get a ton of XP from this place. The main issue here is actually the skags and bandits. especially the alpha skags. Those things are insanely difficult to take down normally, but if you have a good fire weapon, or if you keep the clipper, like I tend to do, then they're far easier to melt down thanks to how overpowered Fire Dot is in Borderlands 1. Overall, this is a super fun way to get tons of XP for the next main level, but incredibly difficult at the same time. Overleveling is also very nice because that lets me do the Circle of Slaughter a bit early. The first 2 rounds are easy, but the 3rd round is where the enemies get way higher level. Another fun fact about the last round is that either a baddie fire skag can spawn or a bunch of alpha skags. Obviously, the way to go is alpha skags, and preferably dot them to death with a fire weapon. But either way, they are much easier than the fire skag that could spawn. There's so many cool things that you only see in Borderlands 1 that aren't in the other games. One thing I really wish was in the other games is this Roid Rage Psycho. Like, this massive psycho is so cool to fight. I know he's technically a mini-boss, but come on, this could easily be like a very rare enemy in some of the other games. I mean, I heavily doubt it, but maybe this could be in 4? I think that would be neat. But that's just another reason to play Borderlands 1, I guess. Another very interesting thing about Borderlands 1, especially if you haven't played it, is the gun turrets in this game. Even though they are rare, gun turrets in this game are insanely broken. Okay, well, they're broken in Borderlands 2, but in the wrong way. In Borderlands 2, their scaling is horrible, especially in OP levels, so they can easily be one-shot. But in this game, it works the other way around. They one-shot you. Gun turrets of any type are an absolute menace to the player. And that's another reason it's actually pretty nice to play Mordecai, because I can actually use Trespass, well, later on, to shoot right through them. That is another perk of having a sniper character, but I always guess Lilith could just run up behind them. Either way, yeah, gun turrets, insanely difficult to deal with. Sledge is usually a difficult fight. The main reason I'm having such a hard time right now is because I actually want to kill him with a critical hit, so I can get way more XP from the kill. That's incredibly difficult because his helmet actually blocks most crit shots, meaning I have to get a pixel perfect shot to get the critical and thus the massive XP boost from it. Skagzilla is another one of my favorite fights, at least in Borderlands 1. Skagzilla does actually return in Borderlands 2 in the form of Dukino's mom, but if you've ever had to fight Dukino's mom, you'll know why they didn't bring her back after that. That is because bullet reflection, everybody's least favorite mechanic, and her shock ball attack that almost always kills you. In here though, Skagzilla is a relatively easy fight, as long as you keep your distance, and of course keep jumping around to confuse the enemies. This fight would have been way easier if I had a fire weapon, or corrosive because of Skagzilla's armor, but it didn't really matter because I just have insanely good damage. And in the end, I went for the classic critical kill for that crazy XP boost. That's almost 20,000 XP. That was incredible. From completing that mission, you get the elephant gun. I used it for a few seconds before I realized just how terrible of a weapon it is. I swapped back to my normal sniper. Considering I've been using this sniper for a while now, you can probably tell that I really like it. I believe this is a Torg sniper. Yes, believe it or not. In Borderlands 1, all the weapon manufacturers weren't as fleshed out as they are in 2. And Torg didn't focus on explosive weapons, but they actually had some insanely good snipers and SMGs in this game. I really enjoy doing most of the missions in this game, and one of my favorites is clearing the Sithids out of this raceway. Now, it took me a long time before I actually realized the game intends for you to just drive over all of them. However, I've always cleared it out on foot because, well, the XP gain is far better. I'm assuming most of you know, but just in case, you get way less XP from killing an enemy when you're in a vehicle. Even though it is way more fun to run over enemies in a vehicle, again, it's not worth it for me because I need as much XP as I can physically get. One of the more interesting things I was testing out is read-only farming in this run. Now, I've done some read-only farming in Borderlands 2 before, but I've never tried it in 1. Setting it up is all the exact same. The main reason I'm doing it, though, is not for specific parts, but actually rarities. Theoretically, you can actually get legendary gear from certain missions. As you can see here, I'm getting greens, blues, and purples. I never got a legendary, sadly, but I was certainly hoping to. I'll get into some more legendary details as the run goes on, but an important place to start is your legendary chance actually scales with your level. So at low levels, getting legendaries is almost impossible, sadly. The other thing you might notice, this section also highlights two other major issues with Borderlands 1. The first one is just getting all sorts of different levels of gear. Sometimes I'm getting like level 13, 16, 19, stuff like that. That's a major problem. And I'll get into more detail about this a bit later on because it has some interesting stuff there. But the final problem that most Borderlands games, I don't actually know about 3 in Wonderlands, but certainly 1, 2, and I believe pre-sequel suffer from. Again, this is most apparent on PC, but I think it can happen on console. It's known as a memory leak. Pretty much the longer you play, because of how poorly these games are coded, the game gets super laggy and will eventually crash because it can't purge the memory cache properly. As you can see here, Borderlands 1 suffers from horrible frame rate. Borderlands 2 is best known for just crashing after playing for so long, though. Back to this game's trend of ridiculously powerful enemies, of course we have Mad Mel. Mad Mel is one of the most difficult fights in this game. You're intended to do the entire fight in a vehicle, but just like all Borderlands games, vehicle combat is horribly balanced. And in this game, it's not in your favor. I've always found this fight to be easier just on foot with your normal weapons. As a matter of fact, I beat this fight without cheesing it with no shield in my unique only run, because funny thing, you can't get unique shield until after this fight. Needless to say, I've been through the absolute worst that this fight can give me, so I'm pretty much used to it now. Not to even mention the fact, if a vehicle hits you at all in this game, I mean a single pixel can touch you, you're dead, because contact damage. Combine that with the insanely powerful missiles that all of the enemy's vehicles shoot, yeah, it's a difficult fight. But it is very satisfying if you can beat it without using a vehicle or cheese of your own. It shouldn't surprise you, just like the Lost Cave, I'm absolutely limit testing with the next Circle of Slaughter. As usual, the first few rounds are easy, but once the enemy's level scaling hits, it hits like a truck. These enemies are insanely difficult. The main thing that actually saved me here is unique to Borderlands 1. It's the medkits that you can use from your inventory. Again, if you haven't played Borderlands 1, well, you absolutely have to. It is insanely fun. But in this game, you can actually use medkits from your inventory. None of the other Borderlands games have that. Also, fun fact, you can open your inventory at any time, even while in mid-air. And another thing you might not have known is Borderlands 1 is the only game in the series to have fall damage. Crom's Canyon is always a nightmare because of the density of enemies, the difficulty of enemies, and of course Crom himself up at the top on his stupid gun turret. The big issue is you have to run all the way up to kill him. However, since I have a sniper, I can actually cheese him a tiny bit from range. It's still not easy though. Plus, once his turret locks onto you, you just get shredded. So again, this is a pretty difficult fight. It took me a while to chop away at his health, but in the end, I killed him without too much trouble. The most interesting part, and I'll show you a screenshot of my timeline because the audio doesn't seem to play well, is Borderlands 1 audio being stupid, as usual. It was just like a jump scare how loud his death sound was. That is a major issue with Borderlands 1. I believe it's unique to the Enhanced Edition. There are a ton of audio bugs in here. Well, not a ton, but the ones there are really bad. That's a good example of one, but the other best example is in the Claptrap DLC, but I'll explain that more later. Just in case you ever thought the normal gun turrets were insanely annoying, try having to deal with rocket turrets. On top of the rocket turrets, Taylor Cobb also has a rocket launcher, and in a rare change, I actually died here 3 times in total. I don't think I've died this much to this fight before. If you couldn't guess, they were all rockets straight to the face as well. I mean, it makes complete sense, I wasn't dodging that well, but still, it's not normal for this fight to go this bad for me. Keeping up with my stubborn approach to playing this game, I always like to do Old Haven early, so you can clear it out first, do a few missions here, and then come back for the mission later on. The main problem with Old Haven is actually the types of enemies. because I have to deal with Atlas enemies, and they're some of the most difficult enemies in this game. This is because of their armor and the guns they have. You see, armor works very interestingly in Borderlands 1, as enemies can have like physical armor plating that blocks bullets. A lot of the baddie Atlas enemies have armor like this. Alpha Skags are another good example of this. I feel like I've read it before, but my viewers were actually telling me that getting a corrosive weapon makes this level far easier, because corrosive, well, chews through armor, and it makes all these Atlas enemies far easier. And I technically did have a corrosive revolver, I was literally just being too stubborn to actually use it. Later on when I did use it though, the difference is just night and day between using a corrosive weapon and not. Ever since my unique only run, there's one thing I've really wanted to find in this game. It's like a super secret that you can literally only do at this point in the game, which is of course right before the Rack Hive. You need to find this building in New Haven. You enter the door and you actually have to stand on the platform. You drop all the way down into this neat little basement area. I did not expect to get ambushed by enemies though. I mean, to be fair, I didn't know much about this secret, but yeah, definitely was not expecting this. But they're not why I'm here. What I'm looking for here is actually a weapon. It's a reference to the movie A Christmas Carol. And like I was saying earlier, I wanted to get this Rider in the unique only run because, well, it's a unique weapon. But let me tell you, this thing is absolute garbage. I mean, it literally does a third of what my old sniper does. It has a massive magazine and a good fire rate, but no scope, just like the elephant gun, so that makes it incredibly difficult to use. Either way though, it is a super neat Easter egg, and I'm glad to have finally found it for once. Naturally, I did have to try out the Rider. As you can see here, it's not that great. These crabworms are underleveled, and it's not doing much. Okay, well, against their health, when you hit a critical hit, it does a lot of damage, but again, that's just how crabworms work. On top of that, I think I have the skill that increases my critical damage. So take all of this with a grain of salt. However, this is giving me an absolutely horrible idea. Just like with the elephant gun, let me know if you guys want to see like an elephant only or rider only run in this game. I think a run like that could be very interesting, especially if I did it on a different character like Roland instead. I wonder how that would go. Besides the main mission, the other reason I'm in the Rust Coast is, of course, to do this mission. You kill this Queen Tarantula. She is a massive spider ant, who also happened to drop a legendary pistol called the Thanatos. This is a repeater pistol, and it fires super fast with a large mag capacity. It's nothing too crazy, but it is pretty fun for a little bit. But more importantly, once I turn this mission in, I'll get one of my favorite weapons in this game, called the Patton. If you've watched my unique only video, you'll see why I love it so much. It is just a powerful, good weapon. It's not the best, but it's really good when you do get it. One of the coolest enemies in the game is naturally the Rack Hive. Such an awesome enemy. I am glad that the Rack Hive returned in Borderlands 2. If you didn't know, Roscoe in Captain Scarlet's DLC is actually a Rack Hive. The even cooler part is that during Roscoe's fight, it actually plays the Rack Hive theme that's playing right now. Just another awesome reference. I always thought the Rack Hive was way more difficult than it really is, but I'm a bit overleveled, and well, the Thanatos just shreds him. It's pretty awesome. Or is the Rack Hive a her because of all the rack? I'm actually not quite sure. Either way, this fight is easy enough. You just have to go for the eyes, like with, well, most bosses in this game, I guess. Now that I'm facing actual enemies with shields, you can see just how powerful Trespass really is. I love this skill. Another neat thing that my dad told me is that Hans and Franz are a reference to a Saturday Night Live skit, which I've actually never watched that, so I would not know, but it's super neat just how many references this game does have. And who knows how many I'm missing because I don't actually know them, well, like that one for example. Overall though, I've been using my beloved Patton to just chew through all the enemies. Again, this revolver is awesome. And even though I was struggling with Baron Flint because he is a pretty difficult boss, he's got a super powerful weapon, I managed to clutch victory in the end. Since the rest of the combat is extremely easy, I guess I'm kind of showing off the boss rush at this point. Master McCloud has always given me a bad time, but with these explosive rain grenades, he is so much easier. These grenades are absolutely awesome, and they made quick work of both him and his cronies. The main difficulty of this fight is of course his Iridian weapon. All you really have to do is just hide behind cover, and it should be that easy. Compared to the next area though, that boss fight is a piece of cake. You see, the Crimson Fastness is incredibly difficult. On top of the Atlas enemies, there are also 2 Gatling turrets here, which, as you remember from earlier, absolutely shred your HP. It doesn't help that they're in hard to hit places as well. There's also the ambush of all the baddie enemies, but again, my explosive rain makes quick work of them. This might be my favorite grenade in the game. I have to admit though, the other rains like corrosive and fire have really cool effects, but this one just does good damage. And now I'm really curious how good it would go on a brick, because brick is, well, all about explosive damage. The last few levels are a massive combination of Atlas enemies and Guardians. Like I said early on, yeah, Guardians are not a problem with Mordecai, and that is easily one of my favorite reasons for playing him. I mean, sure, you could just go a shock weapon as any other character, but man, it is so much more fun to just shoot straight through their shields. Even though the last 2 levels do have some Atlas enemies, it is mostly Guardians, which we know how they go already. Needless to say, it was a breeze going through this place, which is a very nice change of pace. After the greatest cutscene ever, it's on to the final boss, the Destroyer. With the combination of my powerful weapons, my favorite Patton, being overleveled, and having insanely good skills, this fight was very easy. The only real issue is that I was actually running out of ammo. I didn't realize just how much I had used up, and I didn't stock up right before the battle. That is one of the few problems with this game. You know, you don't get an ammo vendor for the last fight. That's actually caused me a lot of issues in quite a few runs. But thankfully I have plenty of spare weapons, and again, I'm not restricted to using anything, so it's not that bad. The Destroyer Parasites, which are literally reskinned Rack, are great for getting my kill skills, which lets me deal even more damage. Overall, an awesome, absolute classic fight. The most fascinating difference that I never knew existed until I played the original version of Borderlands 1 is that these chests are actually exclusive to the Enhanced Edition. I haven't mentioned it yet, but in the later part of this run, I was actually doing a co-op playthrough with my dad of the original version of this game, not the Enhanced. So once we killed the Destroyer, there were actually no chests here, and the loot we got was absolute garbage, which was a huge disappointment. But the DLCs were very fun to play, and actually, co-op always makes games better. Another awesome thing is the fact I got the Silent Knight, which I'm guessing is also exclusive to the Enhanced Edition, and it is one of the best snipers in the game, by miles. It does 800% critical damage. That is just stupid. The only DLC I'm really going to be doing in normal mode is actually the Claptrap Robot Revolution DLC. This is mostly so I can get the legendary farm at the end. But man, it is always insanely difficult. If you thought the base game was bad, clearly you haven't played this DLC, because it is so much worse. I also got one of the best pistols for me in this run, which is called the Defiler. It's an incredibly powerful, corrosive revolver, and it makes quick work of the claptraps, especially thanks to the trespass skill, so it was a great find. This is easily the best DLC in Borderlands 1 for pretty much every reason. One of my favorite parts though is actually this level. This level plays a special theme that's only here, and this combat theme is actually a very early version of the Borderlands 2 Highlands combat theme. When I first heard it, I always thought it sounded familiar, and it took me a long time before I made the connection, but it is so neat to hear. It would have been even better if we heard it in some of the other Claptrap levels, but unfortunately, Borderlands 1 doesn't have that many songs in its soundtrack. That's why you'll hear a lot of the same music in this game, which I can't really complain because Borderlands 1 does have an amazing soundtrack. I'm skipping over most of the bosses and stuff here because, again, this is just the early game. I'm gonna go over all of this in more detail later on when I have my final build and all of my good gear. But I can't exactly skip the Minac fight. Such an awesome boss fight, and I always love doing the Minac mission in the pre-sequel. The Minac is always an incredibly difficult boss fight. Besides his super powerful attacks, you've got all of the kamikaze claptraps he spawns, and of course all of his turrets. Overall, not the best boss fight, incredibly difficult, but I managed to live through it. And I haven't even mentioned the classic audio issue. When he fires his main eye attack, that thing is ridiculously loud. Besides the skill point you get from beating this DLC, the main reason I did it is actually for this loot room. This is the single greatest place in Borderlands 1 because it has high tier loot, meaning you'll get a lot of legendaries, especially once I get max level, but it's really good right now as well. And of course, I can farm this room as much as I want until I get all of the weapons I've been looking for. As you can see, my loadout is really good right now. I got a blue masher a while back, which is doing absolute work, because, I mean, it's a masher. And I got my favorite legendary sniper, the Cobra. I got all of the legendary snipers, but the Silent Knight and Cobra are my favorite. Before I go into true Vault Hunter mode, and to test out my build, I decided to do a little bit of Moxxi's Underdome. Now, I'm not a huge fan of this DLC, mostly because you don't get XP or good loot from it, but I have to admit it's really fun. The best part was all the modifiers I got. I usually got like stronger enemy shields, which, you know, I kind of ignore shields, so it's a completely worthless modifier, but I thought that was hilarious. I have to say though, my favorite modifier is probably low gravity. Now, I don't have the audio of me talking on stream because the recording messed it up and the timing was all off for everything, but I was literally saying how the low gravity made it feel like the pre-sequel, and I was like, is this how they came up with the idea for pre-sequel? Overall though, I love this game, and streaming makes it so much more fun because I get to interact with my viewers, and I can learn quite a bit of stuff about this game, which there's some interesting knowledge for later there too. Since I'm done with everything in normal mode, it's time to go into true Vault Hunter mode and do everything in the story all over again. One thing that's unfortunate about Borderlands 1 is that you can't actually reset the playthrough like you can in Ultimate Vault Hunter mode in Borderlands 2. This means that the true Vault Hunter mode playthrough is the final playthrough, but I get so overpowered at the end it doesn't really matter. I don't think it would be worth playing through the base game again. I'm absolutely shredding through all of the enemies with a combination of all my weapons, mostly the Cobra and Masha that I have though. I have to say, I absolutely love the Cobra. The Cobra is just too much fun. I mean, an explosive sniper? What gets cooler than that? Well, I can tell you, nothing gets cooler than that. I'm pretty sure this is actually like my second time ever playing through this game in true Vault Hunter mode, so most of the enemies are pretty difficult. Sledge is a great example. After realizing how bad my Cobra was doing against him, I just swapped to the Volcano and absolutely melted him. With the combination of Corrosive, which viewers have told me it's kind of like Slag in Borderlands 2, it has some sort of armor reduction effect, and of course Fire Dot being completely broken in this game, all enemies can be pretty easy, if I wanted to. Sometimes I just like to play with other weapons and be stubborn like that, because I mean, the Penetrator is pretty awesome. Like a fully automatic low recoil sniper, you can't really go wrong with that. The coolest part is that Mad Mel was almost a one-shot. It unfortunately took 2 shots, but I mean close enough. One of his minions' cars got me though, and that's a great example of you literally get sneezed on by a car in this game and you die. As much as I love Masher revolvers, and my current one has been carrying me for a super long time, I will gladly take a Defiler to replace it. Again, this pistol is just so powerful because of Corrosive. That was an awesome find to add to my arsenal. Here's another nice and satisfying boss fight, Crom. Instead of actually having to deal with his turret, I just 2-shot him and the turret from range. That was awesome. Unfortunately, I have to go all the way over there and pick up the vault piece still, but killing him this early makes the whole level way easier than before. Awesome Rack Hive. Now that is certainly a cool name. But just like the normal mode Rack Hive, this one got absolutely melted. Again, since its crit spots are so easy to hit, and I'm spec'd into a whole lot of crit damage, yeah, the fight is pretty easy. I guess I really haven't mentioned this yet, but the class mod I've been using most of the time has actually been pistol fire rate, and it's had a bunch of pistol related skills. I could be using a critical damage class mod, but I didn't choose to use that. I much prefer these gunslinger ones. If you couldn't tell, the run has been going really good this entire time, but Hans and Franz left me pretty much one of the best things they could possibly drop. A purple masher revolver. That is absolutely insane. I've been looking for a good upgrade to my pistol, and yeah, I think I'll take that. Like, I physically don't know what they could drop right now that would be better than that. I don't know if they can or can't drop legendaries, but this is an amazing drop, and it let me just melt Baron Flint instantly. Another thing I didn't know is that the boomstick can actually drop in a purple variety. I always thought the boomstick was just blue and not purple, but I guess it can be. I didn't expect the destroyer in true Vault Hunter mode to be 3 levels over me. You see, I've been trying to get a ton of XP to avoid this problem, but I guess I'll have to deal with this. Naturally, the higher level enemies are, the less damage you deal to them, which is one slight problem. Not to mention how annoying all of the parasites he creates are. But again, they're also great for kill skills. In total, as long as you just sit behind a pillar and avoid all of the destroyer's attacks, as well as destroying all of the purple eye spots, he is pretty easy as a boss. Definitely one of the coolest bosses ever created though. Especially when they use the destroyer's eye as a weapon in the pre-sequel. Awesome detail there. I did have a few close calls, but that's where the destroyer parasites come in. They're also nice second wins. You see, this is a really well designed boss when you really think about it. Maybe not sitting behind a pillar the entire fight, but it does kind of match the more tactical gameplay of Borderlands 1. Before I really get to any of the endgame stuff, I want to reach max level first. The max level in Borderlands 1, well, the enhanced edition and all the DLCs, is 69. Why they chose that number, who knows. It used to be a funny number before the internet pretty much killed it as a joke. I watched a few videos, and it looks like the best way to get XP is literally just farming this last level. You clear it out, save and quit, clear it out, and repeat. This is especially easy thanks to Trespass, making killing guardians so much faster than usual. I don't know exactly how long it took, but I believe it was around 45 minutes to get from level 55 to 69, making this one of the fastest and best XP farms I've ever found. This was awesome to go through. On top of that, there are a few chests around the map where I can actually get some better gear as I'm leveling up, which is perfect. With that, in practically no time at all, I have already gotten to level 69. Again, this is the fastest XP farm I've ever done, and I absolutely love it, because XP farming is one of the most painful things about these runs. On top of that, I got a brand new defiler from this chest right here. That's making this even better. And here is my finished skill tree. Well, not 100% because I will respec it later, only to change Smirk to a different skill, because now that I don't need XP, Smirk is literally a worthless skill. Once I started doing the Ned zombie DLC, I realized, yeah, maybe I should have just done this as the XP farm instead, because this is all wasted XP. I'm literally just doing this DLC because it's fun. Like, Borderlands 1 has some of the best DLCs in existence. I mean, Claptrap DLC, Ned DLC, General Knox. I mean, General Knox is literally my favorite character in this game. Well, NPC-wise, I think Mordecai is my favorite Vault Hunter. The funny thing is that I found another incendiary equalizer, which is making this so easy because of the fire dot. I say easy, but you can see the zombies are overwhelming me. This DLC, just like the rest of Borderlands 1, is pretty tough actually. It doesn't help that some zombies are defilers. They shoot projectiles at you that give you a crazy slowing debuff, making dodging the rest of the zombies incredibly difficult. On top of that, if you go in to fight for your life, the zombies will actually keep attacking you and kill you way faster than normal. So you can maybe see why I died quite a few times in this. It is not easy. especially with the crazy wave size of zombies that this DLC has. Like, this DLC has to have the largest amount of enemies in like any Borderlands DLC or map ever. I mean, I'm willing to put good money on it actually. There has to be hundreds of enemies in each level. Besides all of the amazing dialogue in this DLC, it has one of my favorite references. This is obviously Scooby-Doo. I just find this audio recording incredibly funny.
No one there. I finally ran into an old doctor who said there was zombies throughout the haunted forest. He seems like a nice old man, so I thought I'd help him out. Who needs the rest of the gang, right?
You smell like popcorn. Now I'm pissed.
Dr. Ned is an awesome villain and boss. He's also ridiculously difficult, but I guess that is just Borderlands 1. I'm not exactly sure what gun he spawned with, but it definitely hurts. I know that much. My whole strategy to kill him was just using Fire Dot. Fire Dot is always a reliable strategy in this game. But of course, the coolest part about this fight is how it plays the credit scene, but it's not a credit scene. It's actually a cutscene to the next boss, which is Undead Ned, and it just makes this DLC so much cooler. Undead Ned is also a very difficult boss, and for some reason, whenever I do this fight, I always seem to die to him last minute. It keeps happening and I don't know why anymore. For pretty much all bosses, the Silent Knight with Mordecai is the best way to go. Actually, I think it's the best way to go with most characters. This is obviously because 800% crit damage. You can't go wrong there. It's especially good because most bosses ignore damage over time effects, which that is what dot means. Overall, awesome DLC, one of my favorites in the series. Technically, I'm doing the DLCs out of order. Well, I actually don't know what the right order is, but Claptrap is last because the bosses from the other DLCs are in here and like reincarnated, which I always thought was awesome. Again, General Knox is my favorite character, so I love fighting him again. Keeping with the typical Borderlands 1 boss format, you pretty much just have to shoot him in the head repeatedly. This would have been far easier if I was using the Silent Knight, but again, I like switching up my weapons every so often.
Damn it, Claptrap. I'm a doctor, not a mechanic.
Another cool thing my dad told me during our co-op playthrough is that line from Dr. Ned is actually a reference to the original Star Trek, which is super awesome. The Ned Trap fight is actually pretty difficult. I didn't think he would deal this much damage. And I swear that has to be like a frame perfect fight for your life save right there. 1 millisecond more and I definitely would have been dead. That was nerve-wracking. In the second to last level of this DLC, it is literally a boss rush. You get to go through all of the bosses again, and since we've already seen how General Knox goes, I'm gonna skip over most of his fight. All of these boss fights are literally the same as their normal counterparts, and keeping with my trend of dying once to Undead Ned every single time, I died right at the end. One of the coolest parts of this DLC is definitely the fact you get to fight Steel for real. But I have to say, she hits like an absolute freight train. Yes, not a truck this time. She hits way harder than that. But she eventually falls to just how overpowered Corrosive really is. Still though, a very neat fight, and I'm glad we get to experience it. Finally, it's time for the real max level Minac fight. Oddly enough, it was slightly easier this time because I have better weaponry, but all of his missile attacks and the kamikaze claptraps, or they're called Divine Wind claptraps, because that is what kamikaze means. But yeah, those claptraps got me because I wasn't paying 100% attention to my minimap. I was more focused on the Minac itself, and they just kinda sneak up on you. Bloodwing was pretty helpful here because I set her to corrosive element, and Bloodwing can hop to multiple targets, so she damages all of those turrets, and on return, Bloodwing actually heals me for a certain amount of damage dealt. Since Bloodwing deals so much damage, I generally heal to full health. However, the Minac did get me a few times here, just because of how powerful it really is. On the other hand, the Defiler was absolutely carrying me just because of how good this gun and corrosive is. Not to mention the fact I am completely spec'd into a pistol build right now. With all of that done, it's time to start farming a ton of legendaries from my favorite loot room. This is also a good time to start talking about some interesting things about Borderlands 1. I didn't learn this until the very end of farming, but apparently when you look in your inventory and see your gear levels, well, it actually lies to you. The level of equipment in your inventory is far different than the actual level of the gear. It's best if you drop it on the ground and then look at the level to see its true level. Why the game does this, I have no clue, but that was infuriating to learn because that's when I realized the game was just gaslighting me this entire time. Another super useful thing my viewers have told me about is the darker a weapon's orange color, in the name card, the better it is. The lighter the orange, the worse the item is. So that's a cool way to distinguish if a legendary weapon is good or not, which is very interesting. The normal General Knox fight is even easier than the Claptrap version, probably because he's under-leveled, but mostly because I was using the Silent Knight. And I'm not great with all Borderlands 1 weapons, but I'm willing to bet this is one of the best in the game just because of how much damage it can do. So that was easy. After I beat General Knox, I get to loot the Crimson Lance's armory. This is full of high-tier chests, which means a lot of good loot. But in the end, I did not get anything really good. The main thing I want from this place is stuff from those special Crimson Lance chests. You see, they actually have a chance to drop pearl weapons. Unfortunately, I did not get an actual pearlescent. At long last, the entire point of this run, Cromrax the Invincible. I've always wanted to see what this boss fight actually looks and feels like. Let's just say it looks cool, but it does not feel fun. I just about got one shot. The only thing saving me was of course Healthgate, and I cannot kill any of Cromrax's minions. They will definitely be an issue. I'm not going to lie, I tried this strategy, I looked up a bunch of other stuff, yet I still died 15 times before I quit this first major attempt. I wanted to try and farm up some better weapons before the final fight. It's neat because I did get a Skull Masher. Even though the Skull Masher is super cool, it's not that great, unfortunately. This is also when I learned that the weapons you have equipped show way lower levels than their actual level. That's why I was trying to get new gear in the first place. I thought all of my gear was really bad and underleveled. But no, it was on level, at least as high as it could get. It just shows it wrong in the inventory. The other thing I wanted to at least try was doing the armory raid again. Now, you can actually do a mission that lets you raid it one more time, but with way less chests. Is it worth it? I mean, kind of, but I also think it's not, because there's actually a glitch that lets you get in here without having to do this mission, so you can infinitely farm it. I did not do this glitch in this run, but I might try it in the future, because this is the best place for the Crimson Lance chests that have pearlescent chances. The only other thing that can drop pearls is of course Cromrax, but I mean, we all know the issue with that. I'm not having a good time at all. This is attempt number 18. It is the first and only successful Cromrax kill I've ever had. I've been using a survivor class mod to actually survive all of his minions on the run to this classic cheese spot. The main issue with the cheese spot is that the geometry is a bit weird, so it can be very hard to hit some of his critical spots. And if you couldn't tell, you can only deal damage through his critical spots. My whole strategy is get to this spot, hit as many as the crit spots as I can, and then go into his arena and start actually fighting him. As you can see by my loadout here, it is very specific. That's because Cromrax's minions are actually weak to different types of damage. There are 3 types of minions, and each type is vulnerable to each of the normal elements, not counting explosive. Once I get all of the crit spots I can in the cheese spot, it's time to run for my life and hope for the best. This is by far the most difficult boss fight I've ever had in any video game. The primary issue is obviously Mordecai's survivability, which is severely lacking. I had a bunch of close calls in this run. It's actually a miracle I managed to beat it in the first place. On top of bad survivability, my aim is also terrible because, well, I have to keep moving or I just die. The issue with that is all of his critical spots are very precise shots, especially because he's moving around all the time. It's also a great example of why I'm not a fan of raid bosses. They're just far too difficult. and the main issue is always survivability. I'm literally just getting one shot on cooldown. I don't die, but that's only because of health gate in this game. Other games would definitely kill you instantly. Since Mordecai doesn't have many regen skills, as a matter of fact, it's only healing from Bloodwing damage and healing from killing enemies, I have to rely a lot on medkits here. They were the true savior of this fight. And the Survivor class mod, that was a major help. And although I do have to admit, it's a super cool, well thought out boss fight, just far too difficult for most players, including me. I have to say though, finally beating him in the end is like the best feeling in the world. After all this time struggling, I have finally done it. Tragically though, he did not give me a pearlescent. That was a goal of this run, but a side objective, I guess. The primary focus was to kill Cromrax for once and for all. I really would have liked to get a pearl and try it though. That would have been so cool. Either way though, that is the end of this run. I loved it so much. Borderlands 1 is one of the greatest games ever made. As always, thank you all for watching. I truly do appreciate it. And a special thank you to all my channel members. All of you guys are awesome. This is going to be Enzo from LookIntoGaming, signing out.